Hello everybody, my name is Korosh Erfani. I am sociologist and the writer of the book Infinitylogy, which is a book about the philosophical theory according to which we will have the possibility to get any resources we need to change the world infinitely. And we have just to know better and deeper the matter and the universe, and then we will be able to modify it as we want in order to get what we need. So this idea of infinitism has a theoretical basis, and that we called Infinitylogy. Infinitylogy is the knowledge of infinity. We want to know how the infinitude is going on in the matter and how we can try to take it over, and to use that as we desire. So Infinitylogy is a combination of philosophy, science, and technology. But if you watch the part 7 of this set of videos, we said that for the Infinitylogy we don't have a predefined, a pre-established methodology. We said that we have to create, to invent a methodology. And in order to do so, we are using the different resources, the different references, and some books are useful in this matter, and one of them was the book that I presented to you the last time. It's called Against Method, and it's we are using it, this book from Paul Feyerabend, and we said that Paul Feyerabend was a philosopher of science, right? And we said that he did a very interesting job on the, everything regarding the epistemology and philosophy of knowledge, and especially philosophy of science. Paul Feyerabend, Austrian philosopher. So, one of his book was Against Method, right? And we said that this book is interesting because it can help us to know if we should effectively do something very framed with a very precise methodology, or on the contrary, we should have a flexible methodological approach, right? Because we said that for Infinitylogy, we don't know exactly from where to start and go to where. We know that there is no end because it's a question of the infinitude, but we know that we need somehow a direction, and we don't know exactly what could be this direction in order to distinguish between finitude and infinitude, or how we can treat, the infinite possibilities or infinite character of the structure of matter. So that's why we should start to study some references in the field of epistemology and philosophy, and essentially philosophy of science, to see what could be the interesting point for us to establish, to set up a methodology for what we want to do in the frame of Infinitylogy. So in this book there are the different chapters with very interesting idea. What we are going to do is to read the different parts of this book, introduction and also some chapters, in order to see if there are points and there are the clarification, there are the suggestion, ideas, orientation that we can use maybe and likely for what we are going to do. So let's start with the introduction, the book that is very interesting with this summary. It said, and I quoted you in the video number 7, science is an essentially anarchic enterprise. Anarchic enterprise. Well, what does it mean? Theoretical anarchism is more humanitarian and more likely to encourage progress than its law and order alternatives. That's the idea. You know, in this introduction, he wants to establish the fact that we are talking about something that could be understood better if we don't respect a rigid, fixed methodology. That is what he calls the Paul Feyerabend called anarchic enterprise. And let's see how he is defending this idea. All right, we start. He said the following essay is written in the conviction that anarchism, while perhaps not the most attractive political philosophy, is certainly excellent medicine for epistemology and for the philosophy of science. So we know that when we talk about the anarchy, usually we remember the political connotation of the word, which is the absence of order. And immediately it comes to our mind that an orderless society could be horrible, could be really very hard to bear and to imagine. Why? Because that will be a total chaos, and in this chaotic situation there would be a lot of damage. That's what we learned by the system of education regarding the anarchy when it comes to the politics, right, as a political ideology. But we know that the word itself goes beyond this idea, the word anarchy, and it is helping us to think freely, to ponder over this or that subject without restriction. And this is what we need if we want to touch the truth. Which means that the particularity of anarchy when it comes to the intellectual subjects is that we can be in a kind of liberty, a kind of freedom to think this or that, or totally contrary of what could be expected, for example. That's the particularity of the anarchy when we are talking about this term in epistemology, in philosophy. It's not only and only the understanding that we have, the usual and common understanding that we have from this word in politics. And I have to say that even in politics, the anarchy doesn't mean that, but it's not the subject of our discussion. So if Feyerabend is telling us that it's a question of a good medicine, a good remedy in epistemology for understanding the science, we should know why he's telling us. The reason, he explained, this is a quote. From here, he is telling us a quote. History, generally, and the history of revolution in particular, is always richer and in content, more varied, more many-sided, more lively and subtle than even the best historian and the best methodologist can imagine. Right? That's a quote from Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. So, the famous Russian revolutionary, right? Why? Because he's talking about the history in general and history of revolution in particular. And if Lenin is telling us such a thing, because he has the experience of bringing a revolution about in Russia, right? He was the leader of the Russian Revolution of 1917, and then he knows what he's talking about. History of revolution with all the complexity that we have in. So that's why he's telling us that when you go over the history of revolution, you will find the things that no historian can effectively draw or illustrate in his work, or no methodologist can imagine. Now we will know why Lenin and also the author Paul Feyerabend is telling us this. He says, history is full of accident, his quote. You see that. Accident and conjectures and curious juxtaposition of events. All the complexity that we can imagine in history. The history is full of that. And it demonstrates to us the complexity of human change and the unpredictable character of the ultimate consequences of any given act or decision of men. So, why we should be interested in history and especially in the history of revolution? Because it's a question of the complexity of human change, right? Everything that we are able to do, and then to modify that, modify our behavior, modify our attitude, modify and change our idea, our action, right? And this change is in such a speed, in such a velocity that it's completely unpredictable, right? What is unpredictable? The character of the action that we are doing, the decision that we are making. So, you see the idea. You see that how when we start to see the history from this angle, the things start to be otherwise, right? Which means that this narration, very classic and smooth narration of the events is not really history. That's the history of historian. That's the history of the methodologist who want to give us a very established idea, very framed idea, ordered idea of history. That we have this event and then consequently the next one and the third one and so on, and then a conclusion. So a very precise and shaped image of the history. While Lenin and also the author Feyerabend is telling us that it's not like that. The real history is the history of the change, the history of unpredictable character of what we are doing and what we are deciding. So that's why this is how the author enters this discussion, this subject. He wants to put forward some preliminary ideas about what he will develop step by step. He continues, are we really to believe that the naive and simple-minded rules which methodologists take as their guide are capable of accounting for such a maze of interactions? You see, that's the problematic of the Feyerabend from the beginning. He cannot believe in the simplicity of the mind or of the intellectual construction of the methodologies about a complex reality. The complexity of reality is such that it cannot be simplified extremely at that point. So that's why we will see later that Feyerabend is telling us that you cannot really understand the deep points of the reality objectively if you do too much of simplification, too much of modelization, too much method. You cannot understand. You will miss that. That's the main idea. And we will see how he will found and bring into existence this suggestion, this assertion, step by step. Let's continue. He said, is it not clear that successful participation in a process of this kind is possibly only for a ruthless opportunist who is not tied to any particular philosophy and who adopts whatever procedure seems to fit the occasion? You see, so in front of or against of this approach of the methodologist who tries to reduce the complexity of this maze of interactions in the history, for example, right? He is telling us that if you want to succeed in the understanding of this complexity, what you have to do, is not to be tied to any particular philosophy. Any particular philosophy that will dictate you what you have to understand from this complex reality. And by this dictation, by this orientation or guidance, it will make you miss a lot of different detailed points of this reality, right? So you can see even from this beginning and in this question that the Feyerabend is not against the procedure, method, but he's telling us that it could be more intelligent, wiser, to use this procedure where it is necessary and not everywhere, not systematically, not mechanically, right? So that could be the first idea that we can have. I'm not saying that would be the case, but just an idea about the methodology of infinitology. You remember we said that as we are treating the infinity, the infinitude, we don't know exactly where to go, because it's an ongoing process and endless process. So we cannot really have an idea about the end of the ongoing infinitude in the structure of matter. That's why we need something more flexible, and here it's telling us that don't try to put your hand, in something that will restrain you, that will, limit you in such a way that you cannot really understand what you are trying to know, to, acquaint. So don't attach yourself to a particular philosophy that will entraves you, that will bore and prevent you to go forward, to move forward toward what is the good and interesting level of the complexity of the structure of any phenomenon. So we start to have at least a little, warning, methodological warning from this book from the beginning. But it's not sure that we will uphold this point. We will see how the things will go later. So let's see. This is indeed the conclusion that has been drawn by intelligent and thoughtful observer, right? So he is trying to give us an idea about the credibility of what he is advancing, right? Two very important practical conclusions follow from this character of historical process, writes Lenin, continuing the passage from which I have just quoted. That's the following part of the quote from Lenin. First, two conclusions. First, that in order to fulfill its task, the revolutionary class, it means the class of those who want to change either a part of society, such as science, for example, which is the objective of this book, which is the objective of the work of the Feyerabend, or society as a whole. Whatever is the choice of the revolutionary class, must be able to master all forms or aspects of social activity without exception. Look at this word, all. And keep in your mind that when we say all, we don't put any exception to this idea. There wouldn't be any exception to this. All form or aspect of social activity. And we will see later when we go through the philosophical aspect of the Infinitylogy, how this word is important, how this word is crucial for what we want to know about infinitude. All. All right. So the first conclusion is that if you want to change something, fundamentally, because it's a question of revolutionary action, and we know that in a revolutionary approach, you are not in the case of the little change or reform or the things like that. You want to completely upside down the structure. It could be the structure of society, a structure of organization, or in this case, science, right? Okay, so we should master all the different aspects. Otherwise, that would be the case for some aspects, but we are ignoring we are neglecting or we are missing some other aspects. All right? So that's why we cannot be revolutionary. And in the book that I published in Persian, you remember that I said that I developed this idea of infinitism also in a book in Persian called Infinitism, Philosophical Theory for Change. I dedicated one part of the book in the beginning to this idea, and the Feyerabend he's talking about here quoted Lenin, that if you want really to change the society in a revolutionary manner, it's good, but you should know how to do so. And in that book, in Persian, I explained that if we have a kind of failed historical attempt by the Soviet revolutionary in Russia, it's because they didn't integrate these important recommendations of Lenin in what they did once Lenin had not been there anymore. After his death, Stalin put the experience of the Union Soviet in a track that was not the good one. And that's why decades after, we had as a result the collapse of the Union Soviet. What did they miss? Stalin, and then after him, Khrushchev, and so on. Just this point, that if you want to make a revolutionary change, you should know all forms or aspects of social activity. Look at this, without exception, without any exception, right? And in the Persian book, I explained that there had been lots of aspects that had been ignored. One of them, I don't want to go to the details, but it's interesting to talk about that a little. One of the aspects that they missed was that in a socialist model of economy and society, you cannot have the things, the phenomenon, the institutions that are related to the capitalist model. You cannot, as we say, you cannot have the cake and eat it. You cannot have market in the society, right? And at the same time, the state as an institution, as two main institutions of the capitalism, and say that we are in a socialist way. We are in a socialist path. We are in a path toward the socialism. You have one of these institutions of capitalism, which was the state, right? We know that regardless of what the very liberal trend of capitalism are suggesting, that we don't need the state, we don't need the government, we don't need the big government and so on, but we know that the main engine of the capitalist society when it comes to the management is the government. Otherwise we will have a total chaos, right? So the particularity of the government in the capitalist model is that it's able to maintain the social order and make function the economy in accordance with the social order, and keep the social order in coordination with the economic model. So the state is the guardian of the system, of the whole system, to keep the coordination of these two, right? Market and social order. So that's why when you have this institution, which is the government, I am talking about the central government, and with the big institution, very expanded functions, right? You are already in kind of capitalist model. And that was the case in the Union Soviet. They didn't have market, right? I am talking about the free market. And they thought that because we don't have this, so we are socialist. We are not capitalist, at least. We are going towards socialist or socialism. But it was not the case. And the state, the government got bigger and bigger, and it got such a point that all the resources of the economy, instead of being injected into the social structure, which means society, because the socialism means simply social economy, nothing else, right? And the particularity of the real socialism is the social economy managed by society, social economy managed by the people. If we have something that is called the economy managed by a state, we are already more than half in the integrated and sunk in the capitalist model. How we can talk about the socialism? All right? So you can see how the mystery of the history is in the details, as the devil is in the details. All right. We will back to the text where the author of the book Against Method, Paul Feyerabend, is talking about a quote from Lenin, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, who is telling us that there are two consequences, two conclusions from the idea of the history of revolution. The first one is that the revolutionary class, the working class, should not miss any aspect of social activity. None of them. It should understand and must be able to master. Mastering means controlling, managing it skillfully, right? All forms or aspect of social activity without exception. So, now here, the Paul Feyerabend is adding to the original text of Lenin. What does it mean, mastering all forms of aspect of social activity without exception? It means it must be able to understand and to apply not only one particular methodology, but any methodology and any variation thereof it can imagine. End of the additional part. So, it's a question of what? It's a question of going through the revolutionary process, and in this process, as soon as you have this impression that you have to apply a methodology, a specific methodology, you should do it. But once the step is done, once the goal of this stage of the process is achieved, you should now change the methodology, if necessary, to go through the next step, right? And you should move forward in this way. So that's why he said any variation that is necessary for moving forward in the revolutionary change, in the revolutionary process, you should absolutely be ready to do so, to do this particular, to apply this particular methodology that is necessary for that part, for that specific part of the process. And the process is long, historically long, right? It's a long time ongoing process. But the recommendation is this: don't forget that whenever, wherever is necessary, change the methodology, use a variation of a general methodology in order to be able to act flexibly, and have the being agile, smart for that part, for that component of the revolutionary construction. And you see that this is one of the main recommendations of Lenin that had been missed completely by his successor, Stalin, and then Khrushchev, and then Brezhnev, and the Union Soviet Communist Party in general. That don't be attached ideologically and methodologically to something that will deprive you from, this flexibility that you need to move forward. They missed that. They missed this crucial and vital point. So that was the first consequences of that initial quote about the history of revolution. Let's see what is the second one. The second is, it must be ready to pass from one to another in the quickest and most unexpected manner. Look at how clearly Lenin was emphasizing on the necessity of change, of alteration, in the method. We are talking about the method. We are talking about the, going forward by a lot of, intelligence. The quickest way, the quickest manner, and the most unexpected manner, which means that it should be so fast, it should be so agile, so well done, that nobody could expect that. But you do that. Why? Because you have a readiness for this. Because you are equipped with this idea that I am not attached, I am not tied to a particular ideological point or methodological approach. Whenever it's necessary, I can change and I can move forward. Like the very good sportsmen who are agile, who are quick, fast, and smart. A revolutionary force should be like this. And the Sovietic revolutionary were not like this. Were not like this at all. They were far from that. They were rigid, they were stagnating in their close bubble of ideology and something called mythology maybe at that time. So that's why they missed the step and they failed. They completely failed. So we will try to continue this lecture of the book Against Method from the Paul Feyerabend, and we try to see how it can be useful for us in order to find a frame of methodology, or maybe methodologies, right, plural, not one single methodological way, but several ones, right? For the infinitology. That's the objective of this work that we are going through, and I hope that it can be interesting for those who like the philosophical discussion and philosophical, sociological, mythological discussion. And we could today in this video we could read almost one page and a half, not even 2 pages, but we are going over the main parts of the text and see what could be the interesting point. Thank you very much for watching this video, and see you in the next video. Bye.